Knut Kausong did Swedish television report. Mr. Gurría, how embarrassing is this for Sweden that leftist government is getting critique for increasing income inequalities and also problems with gender inequalities? Is this a problem?
Let me put it this way, because everything in life is relative. If we could export the Swedish model all over the world, this would be a much better world. If you could export even part of the success that Sweden has had in terms of equality and gender equality among the equality at large, it would be a much better world. The question sometimes is that you need to look from the outside to be objective. And frankly, politics make for very strange statements, as we have seen very recently. We are in a moment when, what do you call it? The Oxford Dictionary said the post-truth era. So the question is, some things are exaggerated, some things are simply blatantly untrue, or some things are interpreted in a way based on what I would call objective indicators, because they want to have a certain political impact, etc. Nothing of this is new, nothing is particularly original, nothing is shocking or surprising, but it's misleading. And frankly, I would like to say here to all the Swedes, you should be very proud of what you have achieved. In the most difficult period in our lives, period, in our lives. There's no sense in comparing to the 1930s, it was another world. The crisis was very deep. It left us a legacy of low growth, of low jobs, high unemployment, growing inequality, of a just collapse in the trust. Trust in what? Of everything we've built in 100 years. Parliaments, presidents, prime ministers, ministers, political parties, banking systems, multinationals, democracy. Why do you think people didn't go to vote, even in something like delicate as the Colombian peace referendum? 1/3 of the people in the most important thing in 50 years, 1/3 of the people went, and then that was split down the middle, and of course they lost the referendum, they now found another way, but how is it possible? I mean, it's an extreme case, because people didn't believe that going to vote was a way to solve the problems. Unexpected results on Brexit, unexpected results in the United States elections, somewhat unexpected results, at least from the beginning of the process in the Italian referendum. Why? Again, it's a statement about something else rather than the object of the vote itself. And in that world, where there's so many demonstrations of frustration or anger, or what you have is a country which stands out because it's growing, because it is creating jobs, because it is dealing with the question of inequality, which started 25 years ago. It is now moving in the right direction. It is dealing with the question of gender inequality, because mostly it comes from the fact that you have 20% of the population today being migrants, and you are the country that is perhaps the best example of how to deal with migration. You may be surprised. When I launched the International Migration Outlook, and we pride ourselves on being an authority on the issue, we last year, published the 40th annual edition of the International Migration Outlook. We're not improvising. It's not because it's a flavor of the day and it's a popular thing to do that we are dealing with migration. We've been dealing with migration many, many, many decades ago, many crises ago. And we chose 2 countries to come and accompany us in the United Nations, in the highest, tribune of mankind, to present our report. And that was Sweden and Canada. So we just delivered a report to the Prime Minister precisely about the integration of migrants and their children, because there's so many unaccompanied children. Because Sweden not only is in the cutting edge, yes, in the humanitarian terms, but it's also exploring some of the most innovative techniques. The fast-track technique, for example, of how to integrate and incorporate migrants in the workforce is an extraordinary example of, but maybe this is the way, instead of waiting years and years and years for people to learn the language and integrate, etc., which is what everybody does, including Sweden in the past, and where we say, well, it takes too long, how can we cut the period? Now you are the ones who are doing in the cutting edge. So I just want to say sometimes it's a little difficult because you have these debates and you have these political discussions to realize that things are good in Sweden and that you are enjoying something which you built. You should be proud because it did not come by itself. You're a very cold place and you are not, the granary of the world, and you basically live by your wits. And you're doing well because you have created a model of society which is, again, a good mix of productivity and inclusiveness. And that nexus between productivity and inclusiveness is the key to success. If you only focus on productivity, you will fail as a society, any society. Because it's not just about productivity and growth. You leave out the most vulnerable. But if you only focus on redistribution, then you will fail because you will not have the engine that will allow for greater prosperity. The nexus between those two is what Sweden got right. And I would only encourage you to continue getting it right. Our recommendations are how to make it better, how to fix some of the obvious problems. You live with them every day. We don't have to come and tell you. What we tell you is, we don't tell the Swedish what to do with Sweden, but we come and tell you what the other countries in the world are doing about the same problems. A lot of countries had a housing bubble. Well, what did they do about the housing bubble? It's not rocket science, but you have to look at it. What do you do about gender issues? What do you do about migration issues? Again, what do you do about skills? How do you get more competitive? How do you get more productive? It's not rocket science, but you got to do it. And what we're saying is, this is a mirror. Do you like what you see in the mirror? Preferably naked, so there's no ornaments, And, well, maybe there's some things to fix, This is what we're doing here today. But again, in the context of a good story. It's a good story. So, sorry for the long answer, but you provoked me.